Thanks, Maddie, and welcome everyone to day 3 of Virtual British Science Week. And our live Q&A today is all about creative media. So I'm really pleased to welcome Andy Gower, Rowley Craigie and Jonathan Renison from BT, who are going to answer some of your questions. In a moment, I'll get the guys to introduce themselves and tell you a bit more about what they do while you're thinking of your questions. And just to reiterate what Maddie said, if you've got any questions, just pop them in the Q&A, press the button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get round to them. Unfortunately, Andy and Oliver, who made the video from West Suffolk College that you'll have seen on the site, aren't able to be with us for the live Q&A today because they're teaching. But if you have any questions for Andy and Oliver, if you pop them in the chat or the Q&A, we will pick those up and we will pass them on and we will put the answers on our website. Okay, so Andy, can I ask you to go first and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andy Gower. I lead a small research team at Adastral Park and BT, looking at immersive and interactive content. And my history, I suppose, is I did a degree in product design, three-dimensional design at Leicester Poly a long time ago. Joined research, was here right at the start of the internet, and have migrated from that point from doing 3D design to doing more interactive experiences.
Lovely. Thanks, Andy. Okay. Rowley, can I ask you to go next?
Yes, certainly. So my name's Rowley Craigie. I work with Andy and Andy's team, primarily around content and multimedia. Started in BT as an apprentice, an even longer time ago than Andy started, and have come through. I've been working in research fields through my entire career, and started off in sort of networking, and then moved into sort of more multimedia sort of studies.
Lovely, thanks, Rowley. Just before we go to Jonathan, I can hear some background noise. I'm just asking, could all the participants please make sure they've muted? I can hear some, oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Jonathan, finally, would you like to just tell us all a bit more about yourself?
Hello, my name is Jonathan Renison. So I studied engineering science at Oxford. I did an undergraduate placement, summer placement at BT, and then I joined as a graduate. So I joined Andy's team. I've been working on various things related to creative media, and also working on things like networking and video delivery.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jonathan. So I hope you've all had a chance to have a look at some of the video content, maybe some of the Have a Go activities on the website. If you haven't yet, then do that after this call. We're going to kick off the questions now. So let me just find the first one in the list. Sorry about that. And a question, and I think it's a question for you, Rowley, because I think this is probably in your area. How can a camera person hold a 360 camera without being in the recorded video?
Yes, a very good question, and a good insight into how 360-degree video works, because yeah, inherently it's true sort of 360-degree video capture captures everything all the way around. So does typically include the people that are recording the video or the film. The only real way to not appear in the production is to either be standing very, very close and effectively underneath the 360-degree camera, or you just have to not be in the scene. You just have to be far enough away that you can set up a camera, have it running, and probably remote control it from some distance away, hiding behind another building or sitting in a different room, controlling it from there. But yeah, that's a very good point, and a difficulty with 360-degree capture, that it captures everything.
Lovely, thanks, Rowley. Oh, and the next question is, and I'm going to let the panel choose who would like to answer this one. At what point does the resolution develop so far with video that the human eye just can't see the difference?
Shall I take that? So,
well,
oh, okay.
No, oh, sorry, on you go. Sorry, no, carry on.
Well, they're happy for you to take it, Rowley.
No.
So the human eye is sort of an interesting organ within the body, in the fact that we see different resolutions at different sort of fields of view within our eye. So the center part is really highly dense, high dense sort of resolution that the eye can pick up. But as we progressively go further and further out, it gets less and less so as you get more towards the peripheral vision. If we just take that center eye, in order, if you were going to try and create a 360-degree video that would match the resolution your eye could actually resolve, it would have to be, I think, 42,000 pixels in the full 360 degrees fundamentally. But that's still pretty unachievable for video type of capture at the moment. But there are some headsets, some VR headsets coming out that try and take into account the fact that the eye can only resolve that level of resolution. So what they actually do is they have a small central part of their display, which is really highly densely packed with those pixels. And then outer beyond that, it uses less pixels, but there still fundamentally is the slight issue of us capturing at that very high resolution, sort of 45 or so thousand pixels in full 360. It is possible to do by putting multiple 8K cameras side by side and stitching those together, but we haven't even been able to do that at the moment. We've done 8K. We're starting to think about 16K, but that still is quite a way on beyond that. But Rolly, I don't know whether you have anything to add to that.
No, that's exactly correct. It is that very difficult thing of whatever resolution you would ideally want to support that almost full resolution of the eye, you end up having to capture in its entirety. So capturing for that full resolution is very difficult. But you could probably get closer to 24K capturing, which maybe a couple of years away for us.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. And a question about a different kind of capture this time. This one's about the audio, and that's how do you capture the audio for a 360-degree video?
Rolly?
Again, all of these sort of capture ends. This is typically my sort of specialist area for the last couple of years, certainly. So you again, as this in exactly the same way as the video, you're really looking to capture the experience of audio coming from all directions. So the simple way of thinking about it is just to have either enough microphones spread around in a sort of ring sort of capture in order to bring in that audio from all different directions. There are a number of different microphone technologies that enable this. You could just have individual microphones pointing in different directions, and different microphones have different angles of capture effectively for audio, or you can increasingly get very specific microphones that have an array of capture heads that are in a pattern such that whilst it is capturing audio from all the way around the head of the microphone, it's captured in a particular pattern, and that can be processed afterwards to then provide you with this fully captured spatial audio that can then match the 360-degree visuals that you capture as well.
Thank you. And I've now got a question about the BT Sport app. It says, do you have any plans to bring the virtual reality BT Sport app to the Oculus Quest headset in the future, or I guess to any kind of headset in the future?
So back in 2017, BT Sport launched their first 360-degree video experience for the Champions League final at Cardiff. And for that experience, we delivered that on Gear VR and Google Cardboard, as well as some other headsets as well. And following that, we learned a lot. And one of the things that we didn't like about headset type of experiences at that time was the fact that when you put them on, you were completely immersed in the experience, which is great, but it did break you off, cut you off from everybody else in the environment, in your local environment, people that you were with. So BT Sport made the decision that, and we're still running with that at the moment, that we will only deliver currently on tablets and smartphones, fundamentally so you can have a great experience, but you can also speak and share the experience with other people that are sitting by the side of you. However, things have moved on quite a way. And, with BT Sport now launching their their Watch Together service, you could imagine the facility in a VR headset where you're talking to other people at the same time as you're watching the same thing. So we never say never, but we might come back around to actually have a look at how we can integrate and provide that service on VR headset. But at the moment, we're still pretty much focused on delivering it to the small screen, tablets and smartphones primarily.
Lovely, thank you. Jonathan, I think this is what next. We've got a few questions around the same sort of topic, and that's around Wi-Fi. So obviously all of our Wi-Fi has been really well tested and with lots of people working from home. And the questions are around, for people watching sport in the future, what kind of Wi-Fi speeds will they need? Will they need to upgrade if they haven't got very good Wi-Fi connectivity in their house at the moment? And will people be able to work from home or do other things at the same time that somebody's watching this kind of content?
Well, I think BT does offer does offer fiber broadband, which should offer enough bandwidth to both watch sport and do other things on the same run at the same time. In the future, also there's a rollout of fiber to the premises, so that'll be an even higher broadband speeds. There is also work improvements in Wi-Fi technology in general. So Wi-Fi 6, 5 gig Wi-Fi, and so on, all offer improvements to the amount of devices you can simultaneously have on this in the same area using Wi-Fi. So I think in the future there'll definitely be scope to have have more devices using Wi-Fi and higher bandwidths at each device.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. Another question. This is an interesting one for anyone who's thinking about changing their TV or buying a new TV. What's the next big change going to be in TV, and will we have to update our TVs or get a new one to be able to experience it?
So we see probably, as you know, the resolution has been the primary sort of differentiator up to now between the different types of TV that roll out. First, we had HD Ready, which was 720p, and then HD, which was 1080. And now we're pretty into this sort of 4K domain, and you can obviously buy even 8K TVs out there now. One of the other big differentiators that has been brought to market is high dynamic range. So increasing the number of colors and the difference between those that you can actually display on a TV set. And obviously that means that we have to capture things in a different way as well. We are now starting to think about changing a different facility, a capability of TVs, things like frame rate. So at the moment, most TVs operate sort of at 50 or 60 hertz. But we're thinking about what happens and how does it change sports viewing if we capture higher resolution and higher frame rate. So if we were kind of capture football or other sports at say 100 or 120 frames per second, we'd ideally like to actually push that through to devices capable of displaying that content. So we see perhaps the next type of step change in displays might be fundamentally the reduction in the cost of 8K TVs and maybe increasing the size of them as well, making them thinner and lighter so you can store them within your home, keeping up with the high dynamic range and maybe increasing that slightly further, but fundamentally seeing what benefits we can bring to market and if we can utilize the higher frame rates that some of these future TVs might actually support. I don't know whether Rolly or Jonathan, you have anything to add to that or different views?
I mean, I think I would say that our main focus within our particular team has been with this increasing resolution of capture. So that does kind of lean through towards the having 8K televisions, possibly beyond that or so. But I think, as Andy has said, that primarily is probably, I think, focusing towards if you end up buying a larger and larger television, then you need a certain jump in resolution, possibly to 8K. I can't immediately see that as being a very soon thing that people will be doing a lot of. But the other sort of phrase that colleagues of ours like to say is it's not necessarily just about more pixels, it's possibly just about better pixels. So all of that technology that Andy mentioned about wider range of colors and deeper colors and more frames per second helps with possibly staying at that sort of 4K resolution for the broadcast and the experience for probably some little while, but increasingly better and better and better pixels and the way that those pixels are produced for us to view.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. And another really great question here, which is, can one of you explain it kind of quite simply, what's the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality?
Shall I do that? So extended reality is basically a spectrum. I've introduced another term there. Extended reality is a spectrum of different experiences. Virtual reality is basically transporting you to a completely different environment. Typically, we've seen that with some of the VR 360-degree sports experience we provided, where we're taking you to the edge of the stadium or to riding on the back of a bike. So it's an all-encompassing display that completely blocks you off from where you are, but transports you to this other world. Augmented reality typically tries to provide an augmented layer over where you are to add contextual information, which might be purely text labels over certain things telling you about what's in your scene or helping you to remember a name of somebody you're just about to meet. Or it could be placing virtual objects, embedding them in the real scene so they look as though they're actually there. So if any of you have played with the IKEA app, where you can virtually download bits of furniture and place them in your living room or your bedroom to see how they'll look before making that purchase, that's augmented reality. It's about putting a virtual layer over the real world to give you this augmented view of what you normally perceive.
Lovely, that's great, and I like that you added that extra term in there just to get a new one in. We extended reality. We heard it here first.
Well, it's a common term, but XR is one that basically tries to encapsulate all of those.
Brilliant. And okay, thanks, Andy. And just a reminder to everyone on the call, if you would like to ask a question, if you click on the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, you can type your question in. So do keep them coming in. So another question that's coming, which is they're all very good questions today, is that this person gets headaches when they play games on VR headsets. Will they have the same problem if they watch TV in this way?
I think it is. At the moment, it can be seen as a problem for that to happen. The hope and the sort of view that we have is effectively, because these technologies are still relatively early on in development in a lot of ways. The hope is that there will only ever be sort of leaps forward in quality, and that increase in resolution that we've talked about, increasing in capture resolution, increasing display resolution, will hopefully reach a point where it is very difficult to distinguish between those images that are being sort of shown to you and a more realistic view of things. There's nothing inherently different for the way your eyes work in terms of watching a screen that's effectively very close to your eyes. Your brain does a very good job of figuring out where there is supposed to be depth and such. And I'm sure we'll cover in somewhat, maybe one of the questions come out regarding that aspect of whether you see in stereo. If you've got two eyes, you're obviously looking at different images to give you a stereo depth. So your eye works in a very similar way, looking at virtual reality content on a headset device as it does in the real world. The problem at the moment just comes because of that display resolution. There can be different features in how bright the display is that you have to be very careful about these sort of things. Certainly at the moment, I think most manufacturers recommend virtual reality and to an extent augmented reality are supposed to be taken in slightly shorter doses than you would say necessarily watching entirety of a film. So maybe at the moment, with the current state of technology for these display devices, you probably have to take maybe a 10-15 minute break every half an hour, 45 minutes or so, just to try and avoid that sort of some level of eye strain. But again, hopefully that will improve as the resolution of displays improves as well.
Lovely, thank you, Rowley. So this is a slightly different question from this person that says, this is so interesting, which is excellent. I'm glad that you're finding today interesting. Can I ask how you all came to work in this field and what I can learn or what skills I might need to get there?
Well, as you've probably seen from the introductions, all three of us came via a different route. So, I came from a design background. Rolly came from sort of a more engineering, and sort of and Jonathan from a computer science background. And I think that the key thing is that we all share an interest in trying to create these great user experiences, and we're pretty good at it, we think, and showcasing what we do, and trying to create concepts and deliver concepts to BT Sport and get buy-in from our lines of business. But I think the key thing is that we work together, and I think it's that key working together and bringing together those different mixes of skills that really enable us to evolve and develop these new services that we can deliver to our customers. So really, the routes to doing things like this can be quite varied. Sometimes it is quite of a large ask to say you want to do it all, but often when you're trying to do this particular thing right at the start, you have to know about the tech. You have to know how to create a good narrative around the content you're trying to create and to showcase. You have to be a camera person, somebody that knows about audio. So unfortunately, at those very early stages about trying to do something in this space, you do almost have to be able to juggle all of those balls at once. When you get into, I suppose, a more professional field, because it becomes so deep and because the work requires such diligence, we do have to bring different skills together in order to create a more of a professional service, I suppose, at the end of the day. Does that help? I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in.
Well, as Andy said, our entries into BT were at different times and through different routes. So again, yes, certainly at school, I was reasonably interested in the STEM subjects. So that was what was initially gave me my interest to join BT as a company, to work in that sort of electronics and engineering sort of field. And again, so I came into the company as an apprentice and through the apprenticeship scheme. And so during that 3-year process, was more completing electronic engineering studies to sort of HND level. So didn't go to university as such, but completed those studies through the apprenticeship program. And probably the early parts of my career were more based around that technology area, computer sciences sort of stuff, but also reasonably practical real world solutions that were being put in place at the time for networks and configurations of that sort of thing within the company, all still within a research part of BT. So it was really my sort of separate interest in initially photography as being just a hobby that I've had all of my life, and then moving that increasingly into video and film sort of production techniques, and found that sort of outside interest really worked very well with bringing some of those interests into BT. So increasingly moved into a more sort of what you could call a true research role, and so bringing those outside interests of mine into the fields within BT that I was starting to look at or starting to move into, because of sort of one part of my life fed the other part. So that's worked very well for myself. I certainly would say it certainly with BT and working in the research field, it's a very good company for encouraging you to continue learning all the way through. As Andy mentioned, there is none of us can claim to know all there is about even one subject, let alone a larger number of subjects. So it's a very worthwhile thing to sort of aim yourself towards where you think you have interest in terms of schoolwork and selecting subjects and areas of interest in that way. But it's also worth remembering that you will almost certainly be learning more and more about things as you grow, as you join a company, as you start working. There will be lots of areas of interest that you can suddenly pick up on, and if it sort of is attractive to you, you'll end up learning an awful lot about it. So lots of these areas apply to lots of other subject areas, and one thing can very easily lead on to another. So I found that a very good experience working through BT as a career, certainly.
Lovely, thanks, Rory. And that follows on quite nicely. We've had a question which I'm going to answer for a change, rather than asking one of you to answer it, which is, do you offer apprenticeships and work experience? Well, hopefully you've worked out from Rowley's answer just now that yes, we do accept have apprenticeships. So if you want to find out more, if you type in BT apprenticeships to your favourite search engine, there are many available, and you'll find a bit more about the different opportunities that we have all around the country in many different types of fields. And also, do we offer work experience? So at Adastral Park, yes, we do. And again, if you go to the website that you came to find us today, so the Virtual British Science Week website, you'll find a link there under virtual learning and careers to, at the moment we're doing virtual work experience, but we will be doing face-to-face work experience again when that's possible, but we'll continue with the virtual too. So if you aren't near us, you can still take part. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move on to another question, which is, how long will 8K take to be standard like 4K is right now?
So interesting question. I think in terms of actual international standards, which is probably not quite the question you actually asked, 8K is already an international standard, and that's why Samsung, LG, and other TV manufacturers are now selling, and have been for the last 12 months or so, 8K TVs. When will it hit the mass market, which I think is perhaps the crux of what you're asking? Who knows, I suppose is the answer. As Rowley and others have already sort of stated, in order to really get the value out of 8K, you really do need a space within your bedroom, lounge, wherever, to place for a very large screen. And often within the UK, our homes tend to be quite small, at least when you compare them to American homes, for example. So we might have less space for actually bringing in a 75 or an 85-inch TV, which really then you can start to see the difference potentially between the 4K screen and an 8K screen. I think for the moment, 8K will still be pretty niche and relatively small market because simply of the price. But as you can already tell, and probably what made you think about the question, you don't have to go very far back in time, 3 or 4 years, when HD was the standard and 4K was at this state where you had to pay a premium for it. Nowadays, you'd be really hard pressed to find an HD TV that was anything larger than sort of or smaller than 32-inch screens. So I don't know, if time repeats itself, which it often does, give another 2 or 3 or 4 years, and you might find that you'll be struggling to buy anything less than an 8K, and 16K TVs might be the cutting edge. Who really knows? We don't know. We think 8K is probably the maximum you need to go to for quite some time. You'd be looking for different types of qualities within the TV, like high frame rate or better high dynamic range in the future.
Lovely, thanks, Andy.
Other aspect, sorry. The
other
aspect
go on.
of that is as much that it really also does reflect on the content creator side, that there's a much slower uptake in creating native 4K content, just because there'd been so much spend already made in order to go from SD to HD. So there's quite a considerable amount of equipment cost for the content creation side to make a jump to 4K. So there's still an awful lot of production going on that is HD based. So whilst the consumer side is relatively easy to focus on, these sort of bigger numbers are better and the latest thing will come out every couple of years, it's very difficult to kind of think that will there be an awful lot of beyond 4K resolution content created for a particular display type, the stuff we've talked about. So certainly 4K natively displayed on TVs is a really good looking resolution. The only reason we're interested in much higher capture is because it's displayed in a different way, in a sort of 360-degree method. So yeah, content creation is also a factor to bear in mind as to how many people are actually going to be producing 8K content for within the next few years as well.
Just building on that further, you do often find that the launch of higher resolution TVs do coincide with these big events, the World Cup, the Olympics. And that's when broadcasters and the organizing bodies for those events really come together almost to support the creation and the launch of those new things. So when the Olympics come, you might find another jump. When World Cup comes around again, you'll find probably another opportunity for marketing to relaunch a different set of TVs with maybe higher resolutions. But I mean, just it was over a year ago, BT Sport and Samsung did some work together to showcase 8K broadcasting. You know, we've done it out of the labs. It is a thing that's coming. You know, the Olympics, I think, there's going to be a lot of 8K content created. But again, beyond that, I don't see ITV or BBC necessarily creating much in that particular domain at the moment.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So I've got a couple of questions around augmented reality, and specifically augmented reality glasses. So how soon will they be available, and will we be able to use them to stream and play games? And a related question is, how can you control what content appears on augmented reality glasses?
So we've been looking at AR displays, augmented reality displays, for quite a while, and as you know, augmented reality glasses, you can buy them today. They are pretty much the preserve, I suppose, of enterprise and business type of use. So we've been using Microsoft HoloLens, for example, to provide an augmented view for field engineers out and about to try and troubleshoot problems with equipment. But they are starting to make some inroads now into sort of the consumer domain. So you probably see just off my shoulder here, a Magic Leap headset, which we bought 12, 18 months or so ago. That was very much a piece of hardware that it's for development and research purposes primarily, but it was aimed primarily at the sort of consumer domain. But there are increasingly in small pockets of the world, South Korea, Japan, and others, new types of AR headsets. So headsets a bit like this. This is Nreal headset. This plugs into your standard phone using a USB. And this is still costs a bit of money, less than £1,000, for example. But these types of things are now becoming to market and are aimed at more of the consumer domain than the enterprise domain. So yeah, you will slowly start to see these types of devices filtering in. I think it was a double-barreled question. I think it was, how can you define what content comes? How can you
control the content that comes onto them?
It's so you discover content in the same way as you normally would through an app store. The way that you actually control it typically might be through voice interaction. So a lot of these devices, because you haven't got a mouse in your hand, you rely on the voice commands to action certain things. HoloLens uses a pinch and zoom, so some form of gesture. So there are front-facing cameras in a lot of these displays trying to work out where you are so that it can track things and make sure that virtual objects stay locked in place in the real world. So you can use those for actually doing sort of pinch actions and move actions with your hands to interact with them. But many devices also come with little pucks and little controllers where you have a virtual pointer, so you can point to things in the augmented real world to interact with them in that way. And those typically have, in the case of Unreal and actually the Magic Leap headset as well, just behind me, a little trackpad on the top, so you have a virtual pointer there. So they're taking a lot of the capabilities you'd normally associate with interacting on a PC or a Mac and bringing those to those augmented glasses. But the most interesting thing, I think, is voice control paired with actually gaze control as well. So some of these actually devices know where you're looking, and if you link that in with, I want to action that thing I'm looking at, that's another way you might interact with objects within an augmented or even a VR scene.
Wow, very interesting and very cool, I think, too. Jonathan,
something as a move on from some of that talk, in the video world for 360 video and things, you can pretty much use the same sort of tools as you would for regular video. But I mean, certainly Jonathan has done a lot of development work for AR. Jonathan, could you explain just what are the sort of tools that you start off with using to develop for what is this combination of augmented reality, this video world, but also this layering on of additional material?
For development point of view, I mean, we're using development tools like Unity to define like a virtual reality scene, which you can then place on top of the real world, for example, or using the augmented reality glasses. So in that case, the device would scan the real world. It detects features like corners and edges and planes and so on. So then you can calculate how things are placed in 3D, and then you can then display on top of that. In terms of control, because you know where things are, you can then use something like a pointer up or a gesture to select things in the scene. For example, the puck controller that Andy demonstrated, you can use that to show a laser pointer which selects things in the scene or selects items in the real world, and then you can interact with those in that mechanism.
Very cool. And I've got another.
Sorry,
no,
I was
on,
just going to say. And Unity is the sort of development area that you work in. That's primarily used as games development, effectively, isn't it? That it works very well in this AR sort of world.
Yes, it is a games development engine, but again, it can really work for any kind of 3D scenes or 3D environments.
Okay, so I've got a question here, which is a great question. I'm going to start with Jonathan, but I'm going to ask all of you this question. What's the best part of your job?
Well, I think it's being able to work on lots of new and different things, really, rather than just doing the same thing all the time. There's always new areas of research, new fields to look into, new and experimental technologies, experimental services, products, and so on. So it's an ever-changing field of work, really.
Brilliant. And same question to you, Roly.
Yeah, it really does follow on from that. It's we're lucky enough to work in an area that you're always trying to look for the next thing. We tend to work in a sort of 1, 2, 3 year projects that sort of really try and delve into one particular area. But even while you're working through a particular project, you're always trying to have a bit of an eye and try and find what leads on from that and what is likely to be the next thing. I used to get into a bit of trouble by every time I talked to anyone, there was an awful lot of, I just love it because I get to play with lots of new toys, and it's always that thing. And I get told off a bit that I really shouldn't call them toys. These are advanced bits of future technology. So it's that's the really good bit of our job, that we've kind of got access to a lot of that sort of just round the corner technology.
And Andy, quickly, same question to you.
I think it's the fact that we go across the whole chain. So we think, what would customers really like to do? We have an idea. We build up an idea. We create some technologies around it. We work with third parties to build this together, and working with other people outside of BT is great as well. All coming together to then create an embryonic service, which we technically test. We trial with users. We get hopefully interest to deliver it as a real service to with other parts of BT, and then finally it gets delivered as a service which consumers can use and we can get some value on. So the fact that you've been there right at the start, and you've seen it all the way through to being launched as a service, and then you go back to the start again, and it's that loop, and that's the fantastic thing.
I guess it's very satisfying to see it go all the way through, right from being an idea in the beginning, right the way through to people using it.
Yeah, it doesn't always happen that way. And, I suppose if we're doing our jobs correctly, some of the things that we think are great ideas might fall by the wayside. They're just not ready yet. They're too advanced, or, the market's not prepared, or for some reason it might not be commercially sound to do at that particular time. But for augmented reality or VR, this is not the first time we've looked at this. We've looked at this 5 years ago and 10 years ago even. And actually probably 15 years ago before that. So every few years we do seem to loop around. Technology moves on, things change, consumer perception changes, their appetite for wanting to try these types of devices, as well as network capacity. Usually we've been butting up against, we want to deliver something, but the network's not really there to do it. But with things like 5G and super fast broadband, that's less and less of an issue.
Okay.
But really, it's playing with the latest toys. That's the great thing.
It's something
we
we
got
have
that.
to
Rowley
do.
likes toys.
It's something we have to do. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a question here about augmented reality. And are you doing any work looking at how augmented reality could be used to help people with disabilities or to make the world more accessible? Or are you aware of anyone else who is, if you aren't?
So as part of the work that we do, we are always thinking about accessibility in the products and the new services we sort of generate. It's not as though we are developing bespoke things specifically for that particular market to hit a need, but if we're developing a mass market product that we think we want to provide to everybody, then accessibility is a core part of it. So some of the things we've been looking at are subtitling, how you can integrate subtitling as part of not only augmented reality and VR, but simply on the TV as well, how you can simplify that process. And signing as well. We're doing a little bit of work at the moment, seeing how you can bring in a virtual signer to sit alongside content in a VR or an AR world, and how that might be shown. We're doing a little bit of work as well, which is sort of starting around a new idea about volumetric video, which is free viewpoint video. So you're actually capturing a signer in 3D and positioning them as an avatar, as virtually they're there in the real space with you, sitting by the side of the TV doing something, rather than it just being a flat 2D video that you currently see, usually sort of superimposed over the top of the video feed. So we're not explicitly looking at tools and facilities for accessibility needs. It's more about trying to include those in the work that we do.
I've probably got time, I think, for one more question. So a question that's come in, which is, how long did it take to develop 8K?
Is that one for Jonathan, perhaps?
Well, I think there's two different things. I mean, because really, it's fundamentally the same technology as 4K and HD before that. It's really question is, how long does it take to actually standardize it and then actually manufacture devices which can use it? Because I think 8K has been in the works for quite a long time, and a lot of that has been just prototyping it, trying it out, building, actually making content with it as well. So you don't just need the 8K standard, you also need 8K screens, 8K cameras, 8K production equipment. So there's a whole chain of hardware and software you need to make it work beyond just the standard.
Brilliant. It sounds like it's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, certainly in terms of our sort of process, looking at primarily, we were looking at 8K because of the 360-degree capture sort of project work. So we were looking to capture in using multiple cameras at HD and multiple cameras at 4K, and then stitching those together to produce 8K. We were certainly looking at that a good couple of years before there was a lot of sort of broadcast production equipment that supported 8K. So it was very much a sort of standalone effort of being technically able to produce this sort of stuff, and improvements in computer power absolutely helped that. It was a long, slow process a good 4 or 5 years ago. So that's got quicker. And then as that sort of processing power improves, it also comes along to building sort of broadcast bits of equipment that by necessity do have to adhere to a sort of an internationally recognized standard. So in the same way as Jonathan says, you kind of have to wait for all of these things to come together so that you can capture, manipulate, broadcast, and for end viewers to actually be able to watch it in those resolutions. It can be a relatively long process.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. So thank you very much, everyone, for all of the fantastic questions. We've got a lot more there, and we will pass on questions to our friends Andy and Oliver at West Suffolk College. Just want to say a big thank you to Andy, to Rowley, and to Jonathan for answering the questions today, and to our friends at West Suffolk College and STEMtastic for hosting us. Just a reminder, we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about connected healthcare. So get your questions in for that. And just a reminder to have another look at our videos on the Virtual British Science Week website, and particularly the have a go activities. You can have a go at making your own zoetrope, and there's also some things there you can do with microbits or with Scratch, depending on what you want to do and what you're interested in. So thank you very much, and see you again tomorrow.